The woman in your life will do what she must do to comfort you and calm you down and let you rest now. The woman in your life, she can rest so easily.
Hello everybody and welcome to Women's Spaces. My name is Elaine Holtz and I'm your host. And as always, I am just thrilled about today's show. Why am I thrilled? I have a wonderful woman by the name of Nina Ian Reimer. And you know, it's really interesting. I met Nina a few months ago. I was at an event up in Sebastopol, and her and I started chatting, and all of a sudden I found out that she was the illustrator for a book called Our Bodies Ourselves. Now, if many of you out there don't know what that book was about, it was one of the most revolutionary books for women in the 70s that you can imagine, and we're going to go into a little bit about that. But before I start and before I introduce Nina, I'd like to mention a few things. You know, there's some really interesting things going on in the world today. And before I alert you to that, I want to show you this little picture that I found that I think is really exciting. Let me fix it for you here. It says right here, power based on love is 1,000 times more effective and permanent than the one derived from fear or punishment. I mean, that is so interesting to me. Than the one derived from fear and punishment. And you know what's happening now, that's what I feel is that there's a lot of fear going on and a lot of punishment. You know, we're fear all these different things. We're fearing losing our Social Security, our Medicare. We're fearing the war, you know. And the punishment is people are protesting now. And what's happening? They're being arrested. But when we have the idea of love in our heart, I think it makes it a little bit easier. And I just want to read this one more time. Power based on love is 1,000 times more effective and permanent than the one derived from fear or punishment. And you know, it's important, I think, that as women, particularly, that we keep that thought in mind. And what inspired me to put that saying on the camera is I want to do a shout out to a woman by the name of Sister Simone Campbell. She's a nun, and it's real interesting. What happened with Sister Simone is fascinating to me. You know, there's a man by the name of Paul Ryan in Washington, D.C. who's trying to set a budget. And what is happening is he's trying to cut all human services. Now, just recognize that. He's trying to cut hundreds and thousands, almost trillions and billions of dollars for human services. Human services includes healthcare, education, fire departments, police departments, infrastructure. That's what human services is all about. I mean, hospital care. There are some hospitals that are covered under Medicaid to take care of people. Imagine if those funds are not available. Well, Sister Simone and a group of nuns, there's about three or four of them, but she has led the charge, so to speak. And what she is saying is number one, what Jesus Christ himself said, and folks, please, I'm not a Jesus follower. I'm just saying that this is what Sister Simone is explaining. Jesus Christ himself said, what you do to the least of them, you do to me. And nuns such as Sister Simone, what they do is they take a vow. They take a vow to live these principles and to bring these principles into the culture. And when all of a sudden she became alerted to this Paul Ryan budget, she says, no, this is not tolerable to me. This is not what I made my vows as a nun, to sacrifice the poor. She says, I believe in what Jesus said, to the least of what you do to the least of them, you do to me, and decided to stand up. Well, come on, she's standing up to the Vatican. I mean, one of the most powerful groups in the world. And she's saying, no, this is okay, because the Vatican told her, please be quiet. This is not your place. She actually went and saw the Pope and told the Pope no. She says, no, I cannot agree with you. I believe in exact teachings of what Jesus said. Another thing Jesus taught her, which was she expressed, is love your neighbor as yourself. She said to them, how can I love my neighbor as myself if I allow these horrible cuts to happen, and what happens to the least of them happens to him? I can't do this. And so she came back home, and I saw her on an interview on the current television, and one of the questions that was asked, are you afraid of being excommunicated from the church? And her answer was, most of the saints have been excommunicated. So my hat and my heart go off to Sister Simone, and I want to do a shout out and a thank you. Thank you, sister. Thank you for standing up for the principles of love. Thank you for putting aside your fears and your fear of punishment to stand up for what you believe is right for the people. And what's right for the people is that we do love one another, and we do take care of one another, and we invest in our infrastructures, in our education, in our health care, and all the other things that make human life on this planet bearable. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I hope this lets my viewers know that this is going on. And you can Google Sister Simone Campbell on the internet, and you can find out more information. Well, that's a lot to think about, but that's what Women's Spaces is all about. It's all about thinking, and it's all about standing up for the children and standing up for ourselves. And I know that's a lot to say and a lot to think about, but we all got to be thinking out there, because if we don't think, we're going to lose our freedoms. We're going to lose our birth control. We're going to lose our freedom over our own bodies. And this is what this woman is standing up for. So thank you once again. Well, anyway, without further ado, I am honored to introduce my guest, Nina Ian Reimer. She's an artist and a writer, and has written, like I said, she was the illustrator for a book called Our Bodies, Ourselves, and she's got some really exciting things to tell us. Well, welcome, Nina. Welcome to Women's Space.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here.
Oh, it's just wonderful to have you on. And the way I like to start the program out is I like my guests to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. You know how us women are. We like to know about each other.
Right.
We like to know. I know there's a lot of interesting things you have to share. I know you're from New York. So anything that you'd like to share with our viewers, please be my guest.
Thank you. Well, I'm from New York originally, and I've lived in California on several occasions, and these last 12 years I've been out here. But I did come out after Our Bodies, Ourselves. I worked as a medical illustrator at the University of California in San Francisco for a while, which was very exciting to have that kind of a career. And I've taught school for many years. And I'd say about 20 years ago, I discovered that I had a gift in the field of art. And I had been doing various kinds of art for many years, but I had a particular gift, which I guess we'll talk about in a little bit. And I've also started writing. So it's kind of my background. I'm a parent. And I am very, very happy to all of a sudden go from living in cities most of my life to recently living in the North Bay. So that's been very, very much fun.
Well, tell our viewers a little bit about your writing background. I know that you had a desire to be a medical illustrator.
Right.
I believe that was one of your intentions. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because one of the things I know about medical illustrators, it's pretty unusual for women to do that type of activity. Mm-hmm. So can you just explain what that is a little bit?
Sure. Originally, I was a painter. I had gone to art school, and I was learning painting and sculpture without much thought as to what I was actually going to do with it. And this was days before computer and computer graphics and things like that. And so when I did finish art school, I decided that I would go into something that was graphic. And I had a relative who was doing some dental graphics at the time, and she encouraged me to think about medical illustrating. And so I really trained myself in that field. And as I was training myself as a medical illustrator, I came across a group of people that were doing this book, Our Bodies, Ourselves, because I was involved in a lot of the sort of movements that were going on in those days between the war and the women's movement and a variety of civil rights movements. And a friend of mine told me about the organization, and that's how I got involved with them. And so it was actually my first medical illustration work that was taking off. So that was very exciting for me. Not very many women were in it at the time, it's true. And there weren't very many medical illustration schools at the time either. There were a few, one very famous one in Canada. So it was kind of, I became self-taught really, and on-the-job taught. When I came to UC, SF in the early 70s, that made my education even more involved and evolved, because I was working for doctors that were doing medical research and using the medical illustration department there to enhance their medical research as far as publication is concerned.
Well, you know, I just want my viewers to really be aware that when Our Bodies Ourselves came out, it was such a great publication. I was going to Sonoma State at the time, and I had no idea. That as a woman that I could actually explore my body, or I didn't even know what my body was about. I mean, it was amazing. I remember going to elementary school learning about my period, you know, and they showed this little dot coming down.
Right.
But this was a whole new experience for me. Well, you know, for my viewers, I'm going to show you the first cover of Our Bodies Ourselves, and I believe, Nina, did you illustrate this cover?
Oh no, this is a photo. I think it's photographic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
here it
no,
is. Our Bodies Ourselves.
Yeah,
and
it's a photograph.
And to be honest with you, when you look at it, and it says "Women Unite," things really not have changed, you know. Right. So let me show it again. I'm so proud of this cover. I don't know, when I remember when I first put it in my hand and I first flipped through it, it was just amazing. So let's just show it one. This is Our Bodies Ourselves, and this, I believe, what year was, can you explain to us?
I think it was 71. I was working at the New England Free Press, doing some posters and other types of graphic art with some friends, and and there was a lot of this type of art, poster art going on at that time, and so I think the photograph was really important, the photography experience and the silk screening and various things. And so Our Bodies Ourselves was originally produced at the New England Free Press, and it was a little paperback book on newsprint. It had kind of just stick figures and things and a little bit of photography. And that's where I first came across it, and it was sold for like 80 cents or something. And it was wonderful to see it, because, you know, we were just thinking about those things. It was very new to women to be sort of taking control of their bodies and thinking about, you know, the physical aspect of ourselves, not just going to some doctor and, you know, finding out something. But so it was really wonderful, and I really liked it. And then when this book came, this was going to go from the New England Free Press in a little newsprint sort of book to the major press, to big publishers. And eventually this first book was done, I think, by Simon & Schuster. And so it was a real book, you know, and it was in the mainstream. And so it was very, very exciting to go, you know, it's sort of on the cutting edge. And I think what happened was that at that time, the women's movement was just about to take off. You know, it was still sort of among us as women, sort of almost like an underground movement.
It was.
And yeah, and it was just about to hit, and the book came out just, you know, you have to be in the right place at the right time and all those things. And it came out just at that time where it just exploded. And it got to, I'd say, I think within 5 years, it was on the bestsellers list, and within 5 years, the book went out to, I think it was something like 11 countries. It was printed in all these different languages, and it just blossomed from there, and they've done many, many editions.
Well, you know what I have to say about that? It was definitely a demonstration of, as women, how hungry we were at that time for information. Well, I want to thank you for doing it.
Oh,
I mean,
thank
you for being one of these pioneers. You know, we have to honor each other. You know, time goes by, and one of the things that I think is really sad with younger women is they forget their history. So just before we go on, because there's so many other wonderful things that you've been involved in, I want to just flash the book again. This is Our Bodies, Ourselves. It was written in 1971.
And it's by the Boston Women's Health Book Collective.
By the Boston Women's Health Book Collective.
And I'm not a part of the collective. I was the illustrator.
You were the
But it was a very exciting time, and it was it continues to be a wonderful book.
But I think also you mentioned that this launched you as not only as a participant, but as a medical illustrator.
Yes, it did, and it's always meant a great deal to me. I've always held it as part of my heart. It was a great experience, and it was wonderful. I met a lot of wonderful people through it, and it was great. Yeah.
Well, I went to Sonoma State at the time, and I remember all of us carrying it around. I mean, we all had it, we all read it together. We actually had a class called Our Bodies, Ourselves. I mean, it was explosive, really is. Well, let's come into today's world. I mean, so many interesting things that you're working on. I know I'm going to hold this up for my viewers. You wrote a book called Artist is a Healer. I'll just hold this up like this. And what's so interesting, as I was talking to Nina, some of the marvelous things she does, and she also has a company called Dolls for the Soul, which I just think, just the name to me is fascinating. So why don't you just tell us a little bit? I know you even brought one of your special dolls with you. Yeah. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about this new venture, which is called Dolls of the Soul?
And actually, it's new, I guess, in the realm of my life, but it's about 20 years that I've been doing this work. And I think you have a picture of one of the healings. It's actually, I realized at some point about 20 years ago that I had the ability to, when I would make a sculpture, that I could make it look like someone. But I didn't do it on purpose. It was kind of came to me. And I was actually met a woman who told me I had this wonderful gift, and I didn't really know what it was, but as I began to do this work, I developed this amazing ability, and it really was not something I planned, to be able to, I guess you'd say, channel or intuit a portrait of someone that looked like somebody, and that actually ended up being someone who, even though I didn't have a picture, I had never met them, it was somebody that somebody knew. So, and the way I found that out was that I had a little gallery, and I would do these portraits, these little figurines with these portraits, and people would come and they would recognize these people as people in their lives, whether they were a grandmother or an uncle or someone who had either passed over or someone who was even someone in their present life. And so slowly I began to, people would come and they'd say that they would like to know about, how I did this work. And so I would make something for them and I'd give them a little reading with it that would I'd get sort of a feeling about the person that I was creating. And as time went on, the information became more and more involved. And so I would not only know who the person was, generally speaking, an uncle, an aunt, a relative, a friend, but I would know why that particular person was coming to me in the form of this portrait. Why for that recipient I was creating this healing for them. What was it about this particular portrait that meant something to them in their present life?
Well, let's just show one of the portraits, and maybe you could explain it a little bit. Give our viewers. Here she is. My God, it's hard. Folks that are watching this, it's hard to believe, in my mind, that that's actually a doll. It looks so much like a real person. So, Nina, why don't you talk a little bit about this particular doll?
Well, this particular one has significance to the recipient in that it was her piano teacher and friend. And when I made it for her, of course, I knew it was somebody that she knew, a friend. And the significance had a lot to do with creativity. And she was at this sort of turning point in terms of her own creativity. And this person had been very pivotal to her in her earlier life. And that's the significance, that it was kind of encouraging her. And sometimes the work encourages people, or it brings to mind some issue that they're dealing with.
Well, why do you think that's important? I mean, all of us can talk about issues, etc., but here to actually make a figure that's giving you some information, why do you think that, what is important about that?
Well, people feel very validated. It's when they go, it's just like hearing something that you know is true, but you haven't told anybody. You've kept it inside you. And then when somebody else understands it or knows it, it's very validating for you. So, for example, I can tell you one of the stories that was very, very poignant. This young man came to me one time. He was just passing by, and I was with a neighbor. We were doing a garage sale, yard sale, and I had to take some of the dolls that I had made for the gallery out of my. I was at home. I had to take them out of the closet and put them on my porch so that I could get some of my materials that I was selling at the garage sale, at the yard sale. And he noticed them up on, and he said, "Oh, are those for sale?" I said, "Well, yes, but they're going to the gallery." And one or two of them that he liked were actually orders for people. So I said, "Well, that one is not." It was a wizard, actually. I said, "That one's not for sale. That's been ordered by somebody for their science class." It was a science teacher that wanted something for their students, and that's what came out. At any rate, he said, "Well, I would like to have a healing." I said, "Okay," and he gave me his address, and he lived in a different state. I said, "Well, I'll mail it to you," and he went away. I didn't get really any information from him other than the name and address and a couple of things, but nothing really much. I didn't know anything about him. And when I made the doll, it turned out to be his mother, and I knew it was his mother. And I knew that he was having trouble with his mother, and that there were some issues around this with his mother, and that I wrote this whole thing about a war, that he was a writer. That's what I knew about him, that he was a writer. And he worked for a newspaper. That's all I knew. And I said, someday, the mother, these problems you're having with this mother are related to politics and religion. That they're they come from different attitudes. The mother's very religious and very politically conservative, and he was the opposite. And I said, and one day there's going to be some sort of a war. And I don't know where I was getting this from. It was just coming to me. And I wrote him this letter about that he's going to be surrounded by other people who are also very conservative, and that the lessons that he's learning from this interaction will be helpful to him in the future.
In other words, what you're saying, that the interaction with the doll is going to be helpful, the doll that you made for him.
It's less of an interaction than what the doll represents.
Oh, okay.
In other words, and he wrote me back this letter. He says, when I look at my mother in this form of this doll, it brings tears to my eyes. And what he ended up doing was he ended up resolving his relationship with her. He came back and took off time from work. She was in the process of dying. And he came back and he spent her last days with her, and he photographed her and he talked to her, and they reconciled their relationship based on this doll that he had received of her. It moved him so much that there was this validation of his experience with his mother, that he transformed himself in order to reconcile with her.
So that
which I think is very powerful.
And it must have been an eye-opener for you.
This was all these experiences that I had, one after the other. Each one was very different, and each one was as moving, just so moving and so powerful, because they were truly healings for people, as I began to see.
That is amazing. Well, Nina, I'm going to identify us right now, because we're doing a Women's Spaces special, and I need to identify because we're going to go a little bit longer than normal. You're watching Elaine B. Holtz with Women's Spaces, and I'm interviewing a wonderful woman by the name of Nina Reimer, and what attracted me to her at the beginning was the fact that she was the illustrator for a very famous book called Our Bodies, Ourself, which was written in 1971 and was very, very, very impacting in my own life personally. But also, she is also, not only is she was responsible for Our Bodies, Ourself, but she's moved into a lot of different areas. And one of the areas that she's moving into is working as not only as a writer but also as a healer, and that's what we're talking about. So we're going to continue, and I'm so happy and so excited to have her in the studio, and so thrilled that you out there are watching Women's Spaces. So I'm going to ask her another question. So Nina, explain a little bit more. So this gentleman came to you. Let's just summarize it. This gentleman came to you. He saw the dolls that you were taking to your an exhibit, and all of a sudden he wanted a doll. And then before you know it, you were making something for him, and his mother came to you. And through the experience, there was a lot of healing going on with him and his mother. And once you began to recognize it, I think you had an aha experience. Would you explain that a little bit?
Well, there were many experiences like that. His mother came to me in not as one-to-one, in just a vision, sort of, that I could actually create the portrait of her. And the aha experience was like, oh, I'm creating a healing rather than just doing art. It had always, all of my art up to that point had something to do with either medical or healing. And when I was no longer medical illustrator and had just become a teacher, I was teaching English, a variety of things, I wanted to go back to art, and I painted and I did things, but I was looking for something that could combine that modality of healing and art. And I didn't know that this was it, but then I realized after doing it for a short period of time that this was a wonderful thing, and that I didn't know that I had that gift. I didn't know that I was able to create portraits of real people that existed that I had never met. It was so odd to me initially, and I was a little bit hesitant to even say so, but then I met somebody who came, and they told me that I should have the newspaper come and do an article. So I did, and the woman asked me all these questions, and it was written up in the local paper, and people started coming to the gallery. I had a small little gallery, and asking for healings, asking for dolls. They wanted dolls. And so it just blossomed into this wonderful thing of being able to take very little information from people and sort of just create this wonderful image that they totally resonated with, totally understood, down to the clothing, down to the, how did you know my mother wore pink and gray? How did you know she wore pearls? How did you know, even the slightest thing. I remember one time, one woman, I sent her this doll, healing, and the buckle I had found in some tag sale, this little buckle, it was like a little fish or something, and I just thought it was lovely, and I put it on the belt of this particular sculpture that I had done, and she said, that is the exact buckle on the belt that my mother bought me, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it was just like, so, all these different things, and I don't know how it actually happened a lot of times. I would just be there and I just get a sense of something. Or I'd pick out different things to create, and it would just be perfect. I can't really explain it other than to say it's guided.
But what's really interesting, and I have to say this to my viewers, oftentimes when these things happen, in our own mind we say, oh, we're screwy, or someone's going to think we're an oddball,
That's
or
right.
whatever's going on.
That's right.
And the more I listen to you, the more I talk to you, I really admire the fact that you went with it rather than listen to those negativities.
Yes.
It reminds me of, and I always bring this up for my women viewers. Whenever I can put it in, I do
Yeah.
it. I'm 72 years old, and here I'm doing Women's Spaces. I'm on television,
That's right.
and people say, how do you do it? Well, I don't know how I do it. I don't know how I look as good as I look, but somehow Spirit is coming through me and is helping me go through this transition of doing this show. And I think it's the same thing with you. So I just want to validate that.
Thank you.
And I want to hold up the book again, because the book, and we're going to show a doll, but the book, The Artist is a as a healer, and she's going to be in her second edition, actually tells stories of transformation and healing. And you know, folks, if anybody out there is thinking that this is a woohoo, I'll tell you something. Putting a pill in your mouth or taking an aspirin even is a woohoo. Somebody had that inspiration and said, this is possible. I'm going to put all these chemicals together and it's going to work. So how can we judge? And particularly as women, because way back in ancient time, women were the healers, they were the psychics. So I just wanted to say that. Anyway, I know you brought a doll with you.
Yes, I did.
And I'm flipping to see her, and I'm flipping to know what she's all about. So what is her name, the doll?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I don't actually name them usually, because when I'm doing a healing for someone, the naming of the doll itself is something that I think is very important. The dolls actually work for people. This is another woohoo part of the dolls, is they actually do something for people, other than bringing to the forefront the issues of whatever's happening in their lives or the significance of the person who they represent, and therefore the issues that are coming to the forefront. Whether it's celebration, whether they're happy issues, or they're bringing up something that has to be dealt with. Like there was a gentleman, and I have talked about two men, but the majority of my recipients are women. But it just brings up this fact of depression. I just want to touch on that, and that is that this gentleman was depressed. And a friend of his said, well, I want to make a healing for him, and it turned out that the doll came out as a musician, a violinist to be exact, in the pictures on the back cover. And one of the things that happened was that this was an uncle to him, and he was more or less an uncle, and they used to play duets together when he was a child. He actually played duets with him, and he was just going through a period in his life that this man had passed away around the same time that this recipient was reaching that age, and there was this sort of emptiness in his life around that issue, and also around music, that there was something missing from his life in terms of music, that he was really needing to face some of those issues. So not only does it bring up sort of issues, but then there's celebration. There was a woman who ordered a doll for her sister who was going through, she was going through a divorce, but she was thinking that on the other side of that divorce, something good was going to happen. And she ended up going to the museum in New York that was having the butterfly exhibit. I don't know if your viewers are familiar with the butterfly exhibit, but it's thousands of butterflies in this enclosed, healthy space for them. But you can sit there with them in this butterfly exhibit. And it's just, it was mind-blowing and just a beautiful experience. As she was doing that, I was making her doll. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know her even. I just knew her sister, and very briefly. So I'm making this particular doll, and all of a sudden I get this feeling that the doll itself, in terms of the outfit, has to have a butterfly pattern. And so I make the butterfly. I go to the store and I buy it. And it's funny because I used to go to this fabric store. They got to know me. I would bring these little figurines with me that didn't have any bodies yet. They were just the little heads. And I'd walk around with them, like looking for this fabric, and people thought, oh, she is really out to lunch. she's talking. Anyway, but the fabric was very important always to the recipient. It always meant something. And this particular one had the butterflies. Mm-hmm. And when she received it, it was like this confirmation that things were going to get better. Because butterflies represent transformation, and she was going through this, transformative experience. So it was that sort of thing.
Well, before you go forward,
yeah,
I'm having a woohoo.
Oh,
right now. I'm thinking about it because my husband, in our backyard, took a picture on a Mexican sunflower, the perfect picture of a butterfly. And he took the picture around the time that I had an illness and actually thought to himself that I was going through a transformation. And as before you were talking, I was kind of thinking about the next thing I was asking you, and I suddenly had the image. I don't know why I was going to mention something about the butterfly. So who knows? You know, hey, this is Women's Spaces. We're two women talking, and it's just wonderful. So I want you to watch your cord. Don't.
Okay.
You know, this is public access, so we can remind people of these things.
Okay.
But I want you to show the doll, and any explanation that you would like to give about her, please feel free.
This is actually a doll that I did as I decided to do a series. I've been in many shows, and I don't usually,
You're going to have to put her more on your lap.
Showing is not the thing that I do the most of. I do show dolls sometimes when I have, been juried into a juried exhibit. And I had been in San Francisco a few years, and I got into the Women's Craft Festival that's used to be held at Fort Mason, at any rate, from the Women's Building in San Francisco. And so I said, well, what can I bring there? Because most of my work is custom. I'm doing healings for people. So I decided that I would create a series called The Goddesses of Gaia. And so this is part of the series that was created for the show.
She's beautiful.
I have a whole series of 12 dolls. Some of them have sold, and some of them I still have, and she's one of them. And she kind of represents the forests and the trees, and she's the heart of the forests, and the season of spring.
Can I inject something before you do that? 99% of the time when women come into the studio, they're always coordinated with me. Their colors. And what was very interesting, when I got dressed today, I'm a real fanatic on colors.
Yeah.
Okay. But for some reason, I put my green party button on, which is green. And it is exactly in coordination of the colors of you and the doll. And I just find that very interesting. So I just wanted to mention that. Things happen in the I never can figure out why everybody's coordinated.
Right.
And so help me, I would never put the green button on with a pink jacket. But today that I did. So I just want to and I want to mention it to my viewers. We are having another woo-woo here, and that's fine. As I do many times, I always say my self-esteem doesn't depend on anything outside of me. My self-esteem depends on my relationship with myself and the great woohoo. So the great woohoo's in the room now. So continue, Nina. This is just so fascinating.
Well, this is who she is, and when I also teach this work, I want to mention.
Do you sew all her clothes?
Everything is, yes.
Oh my goodness.
And I had a friend who was very helpful, because when I first started doing this work, I didn't really know how to sew, even though I come from a family where I had someone in my background. My grandfather was a tailor, but I didn't really know how to sew, and I was using some fabric glues and various kinds of things, and I had a very good friend come into my life who meant a lot to me and really was a partner to me. And she helped me learn to sew. And so some of the clothes that I made for this series have a lot to do with her help in terms of helping me to design them and sew them. However, most of the designs that I make for the recipients of the custom, not only do I sew them, of course, I can either hand sew them or machine sew them, but all the designs are really intuited. They're not something that I plan ahead in any way. This was part of a series I actually planned ahead to do because it was an exhibit. It was for an exhibit. So she's one of those, and she's a lovely doll, and she's waiting for a good home, but she's very happy.
Can I ask you a question? I know this might sound a little surprising to you, but is there anything that the doll would like to say? Is there any message or anything about her that's so special?
Well, I think that just the energy that she exudes is special. But I do want to, can I put her down now?
Sure.
I do want to say something about the dolls that the recipients receive. And I've done a lot of dolls, healing dolls and healings for people who are writers. And Artist as Healer, the book, the subtitle is Stories of Transformation and Healing. And one of the stories in the book is about a woman who had cerebral palsy and couldn't speak from that experience. And so she wanted to write. And when I made the healing for her, it was a doll or sculpture that helped her to actually do that writing. And the story is rather poignant. But a lot of the people that I do work for, what the doll represents is some energy and some information. And I use my dolls for helping me to do my writing. And so it's sort of it's like a vehicle. I always tell people it's a focal point in which that's why I have them name the doll, because once they can understand how to reach a certain level of channeling, because channeling is just listening to spirit or just getting an idea of what spirit is feeling, calming you, feeling about you, feeling with you. Once they hear the name, and I often tell people, you'll be driving along or doing the laundry and all of a sudden the doll's name will pop in your head and you'll know that's the right name.
Well, I want to share something with
Yeah.
you, too, as you're talking about this, is because when you talk about using dolls for writing, I was in Canada, I believe it was. No, excuse me, I was in Alaska with my sister. And we found this hand puppet years and years ago, and it's got 5 different characters. It's got 2 human beings. It's got 3 animals on it.
How wonderful!
And every once in a while, and to my viewers, I will bring this puppet, this hand in for the next show to show you and to relate back to here. But every once in a while, when I want to write something or write a poem, I put that little hand puppet on, and I kind of talk to it. The
That's
man and the woman, they tell me something, then the animals talk. And it always mystified me. So, and I'll bet most of our viewers out there at some point, because I know when we were children,
Yes.
we talked through our animals and our toys
That's
and our
right.
dolls,
That's right.
So
That's
it's just amazing. I just wanted to throw that in. Go ahead.
Well, that's important, and I think what's happened over the course of, Hollywood has created an image that it's scary. There's a whole element of, people, well, that's voodoo. And voodoo is actually a word called verdun, and comes from a spiritual path in Nigeria, West Africa, and it is a healing path, and it's a goddess path. So, it was sort of taken on by white slave owners to say, we're scared of what you're doing. But I always tell people that it's not voodoo, it's acupuncture. Think of acupuncture. And, all the healing modalities in the world are very, very similar. If you take them down to their basic core, they're very, very similar. And I was at a conference many years ago where we got to exhibit as well as speak and have our books and things. And a man from, he is originally from China, he came to me and he told me the story of how they developed acupuncture. And he said that when they were starting to teach acupuncture to students, they created a doll figure made of metal, and they put lots of holes in it where the acupuncture needles were supposed to go, but they left the top of the head open so they could put like a cork or a closure there. And what they did was they dipped the doll into wax, and then they would pull the doll out of the wax so that all the holes were covered. They'd pour water into the top of the head of this metal doll and seal it. And if the student got the acupuncture needle correct, the water would squirt out. And so that's how, and he came over to me and he said, I am an acupuncturist. And he had a doll. His name is Tom Tam. And he had a doll, an acupuncture doll. So what he had developed was this doll that had all the acupuncture points written every place on this doll. And he came over to me, he said, we do the same thing, you and I. He knew immediately, he recognized that my work was the same as his work. So it was very fascinating, that people warp, especially women are taught, well, you play with dolls when you're little, boys don't play with. There's all these stereotypes around what figures, sculpted figures, dolls, whatever you want to call them, are, but particularly that name, But if you look around the world at the people that have been healing for thousands of years, it's all very, very similar work.
It's just fascinating. Well, Nina.
Thank you.
Time goes by fast
Yes.
when you're having a good time, even though we're turning this into a special, and I just can't tell you how much I appreciate everything that you have shared and meeting you. And what I like to do at the end of the show, this is always a surprise to my guests, but that's okay. Surprises are fun. It keeps us on our toes.
Okay.
Is to look over at this camera and any message that you would like to give, particularly this is Women's Spaces, any information or anything we may not have covered, whatever is in your heart, please feel free to just look over at this calendar and just anything you want to say.
All right. I guess the most important thing that I've learned and that I teach is that everybody has creativity. Creativity is the passion and the expression of universal love. And people say laughter is the universal love, or music is the universal love, and it's something that everybody understands, and that's all true. But that's all part of music, and laughter and enjoyment and appreciation are part of creativity. And so I guess, never give up on that element of your life. Always try to find a vehicle and a voice, whether it's writing or music or art of any kind. It's really the joy of life in so many ways.
I couldn't have said it any better, Nina. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being on Women's Spaces. You've given me an interview beyond what I expected at the beginning. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here.
Thank you.
And to my women viewers and to all my viewers, my God, what an interesting interview. It's just like I go, wow. But life is a mystery when you think about it. I remember when I was a rather young girl and we had the blessing of going to the moon, and they took this picture of the Earth. And I remember looking at it, and I remember talking to my dad saying, Dad, is that really where we live? We live in the middle of this universe and on this Earth. And I was so curious, why we didn't fall off. And I remember my grandson, we went outside in my backyard one day and the moon was real full, and I said, look at Ryan, look at that beautiful full moon. And all of a sudden my grandson, he must have been about 6 years old, he got so quiet and he said, Gamma, why doesn't the moon fall out of the sky? And I says, Ryan, I'm going to buy you 1,000,000. There's so many books out there that I could explain that will explain that phenomena. But you know something? I don't care what they say. As far as Grandma's concerned, it's the great mystery. It's the great mystery how we stay so balanced. It's the great mystery how we're even here. It's a great mystery how we're even born. So when you hear interviews or stories that Nina explained, how can we define that? How can we say that what she's doing is right or wrong or voodoo, like she said, or woohoos, whatever we want to call it? We don't know. Each one of us out there has a special gift, and we have to allow that gift to come forward. And I think one of the most important things she said is that creativity is so important, and so many times that we hold it back. I remember, and I'm going to go back to doing the television show. I remember when I thought of doing a TV show, I thought, God, who are you, Elaine, that you want to do this? But it's my creativity, and I found it just like you can find your creativity. So there's a lot to think about in this interview. I just find it fascinating. I really do, and I really support Nina in her work, and I thank her from the bottom of my heart for illustrating that wonderful book, Our Bodies, Ourselves, because there are many, many women out there who, when they hear me say, it has changed my life, I know that they will repeat the same thing. It changed hundreds and thousands of women's lives by being to see what their bodies look like and how they can take care of their bodies, how babies are born, how they can better take care of themselves during those periods. I mean, I can go on and on about the book. It was so fabulous. But like I do at the end of the show, I try to remind my viewers, particularly remind my women viewers that, number one, I'm beginning to see it's so important to get involved in local elections. We've got some wonderful, wonderful women running in this county for Board of Supervisors, for City Council. I mean, just some wonderful women running. It's just exciting to me how intelligent they are and how much they bring forward. And like I also try to do at the end of this show, and to encourage my women viewers, get off your duff and do something for peace, do something for the children. We are the birthers. You know, I get so upset when they're talking about Obama and they call their group the birthers. I'm sorry, guys, you are not the birthers. We are the birthers. The women are the birthers. We give birth to children. You know, Nina and I are both mothers. There's many mothers out there. Even if you're not a mother, the great Goddess, the Great Spirit gave you that capacity. So it's our responsibility to stand up for the children. And if we don't stand up for the children, what kind of future are they going to have? And one of the things I try to do is, at the very least, encourage my women viewers particularly to pick up a pen, write a letter, sit at the computer, type a letter, write a letter to the editor, write a letter to your congressman, to your senators, to your local people, and make one simple suggestion. And that is, before they write that important bill, before they take that important vote, they ask one simple, and this is such a simple question, is it good for the children? Because if it's not good for the children, it's not good for the future. And we all want a future. And you know something, I got to tell you a secret. We were all children at one time. You know, and I'm blessed that I made it to 72. I worry about my granddaughter with all the things that are going on, you know, the environment and the food and all the different things. So it's so important that they ask that one question, is it good for the children? And if it's not good for the children, let's not do it. And as I repeat in every show, war is not good for the children. Not having health care is not good for the children. Not having a good education is not good for the children. Not having good water or clean air is not good for the children. So remember that. And once again, a special thank you to Sister Simone Campbell for standing up for women, for standing up for the future of the children, and saying, you know something, what you do to the least of them. That is so important, because you know there's an old saying, throw your religion out, throw everything out. And remember this old saying, and that is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's a very important statement. Just think about it. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You don't want anybody to hurt you, right? Well, then why should you hurt anybody else? Anyway, thank you so much for watching. This is Elaine Holtz with Women's Spaces saying, I will see you the next time.
Woman in your life will do what she must do to comfort you and calm you down and let you rest now. The woman in your life, she can rest so easily. She does everything you do because the woman in your life is you. The woman in your life knows simply what is true. She knows a simple way to touch to make you whole now. The woman in your life, she can